The crystal chandelier glittered like a net of stars, scattering 1,000 cold pinpricks across the white linen. The private room at La Mirabelle, where power came plated in silver, was quiet enough to hear a spoon-brush porcelain. At the far end of the table, Lin An sat in a matte black wheelchair, palms resting on the armrest to steady the faint tremor in her fingers, watching her husband Koi laugh a little too loudly at something his father, Mr. Dat, had just said. "So," Mrs. Minon asked, smiling with the effortless sweetness perfected at charity galas, "you're still not back to work, dear?" Her eyes never warmed. 3 years since the crash. 3 years of the same question. Lin Ann kept her voice even. "I consult from home." "Consult," Mr. Dat echoed, adjusting the lapel of his ash suit, the kind a vice president at Aurelia Systems could treat himself to. "That's what people call it these days." Coy said nothing. As always, he rotated his wine glass, letting his parents carve the conversation until it bled. "I think it's wonderful that Coy has stood by you," Mrs. Minon went on, touching her napkin to her lip. "Not every man would commit to a woman who can't even be a wife in any meaningful sense." Coy slid in, amused rather than defensive. Her smile spread. "I wasn't going to say it, but no walking, no children, no sharing the load. It's a lot for my son to carry." Words landed like stones on skin. Lin Ann had learned to keep her face unbroken. She'd endured worse, especially since Na Tran from Koi's office had turned up in his camera roll and on hotel receipts. "Let's order," Lin Ann said softly, reaching for the menu. Koi's hand clamped around her wrist. Not hard enough to bruise, just cold enough to humiliate. "My mother was speaking." She met his eyes. There'd been a time they looked at her like sunrise, before he sniffed around the money, before he decided she was merely a clever girl from an ordinary family. The accident hadn't changed him. It had revealed him. He released her and leaned in, wine on his breath. "What then? You'll roll out? To where? Who wants a—" His father barked a laugh. His mother hid a smile in the rim of her glass. Something inside Lin Ann cracked, not breaking, but the final split that would open the stone. "You should be grateful," Coy said louder. Heads turned. "I could have left you in that hospital bed. The doctors said you'd never walk again. I stayed. I sacrificed everything." "You sacrificed nothing," she answered, level over the Roar building in her chest. "I pay for everything. The apartment, the car, your parents' country club dues." Color flared up his neck. "That's my money. I'm your husband. What's yours is mine." "That's not how—" The spit hit her cheek before she could finish. Time bowed. The room hollowed. She felt the cold slick slide, felt eyes latch onto her, felt the last intact piece of dignity torn loose. Coy settled back like a man who'd scored a point. Mr. Dat coughed. Mrs. Min An looked away, flustered for the first time all evening. "Don't talk back to me," Coy murmured. "Don't embarrass me in public. Without me, you're nothing. Remember it." Her hand rose, steady now, and pressed the napkin to her cheek. When she lowered it, the cloth held a single dark wet bloom. She folded it precisely and set it beside her plate. "Excuse me," she said, almost a whisper. She turned the chair and left. In the accessible restroom, she locked the door and stared at her reflection. A beautiful brown-skinned woman with natural curls pulled back, eyes that had learned not to shatter, a damp mark on her blouse where she'd pressed too hard. Her fingers no longer shook when she took out her phone, opened the encrypted app, and typed 3 words to Dewey, her assistant, the only person who knew the truth. "It's time." The reply came at once. Finally, all set. She looked at herself again. Coy thought she was nobody. His parents thought she was a burden. They had no idea she was the anonymous founder and majority owner of Aurelia Systems, the company that paid Mr. Dat's executive salary and stamped Mrs. Minon's title on an office door. No idea that every glass they raised, every bag they swung, every dinner they flaunted was financed by the empire she built. No idea the woman they just degraded carried the master switch to their world. They were about to learn. She wiped her face clean, squared her shoulders, and unlocked the door. When she rolled back in, Coy barely glanced up, too busy tilting his phone toward his parents. probably a photo of Natran. "I'm leaving," she said. "Fine," he replied, distracted. "Home late, don't wait." "No," she enunciated, "I'm leaving. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow." His head snapped up. Conversation at both sides of him froze. Then he laughed. "You can't. You need me." "For the first time in 3 years," she said, and felt a real smile uncurl. "I really don't." She turned for the exit. Behind her, Coy called her name, panic lacing the last syllable. She didn't slow. She didn't look back. Revenge wasn't the point. Revelation was. 4 years earlier, she'd been a different person. Not physically. The crash was 2 years away. But in pace, posture, possibility. Tonight, in a hotel suite designed down to the fraction for accessibility, she'd invested in the chain to guarantee it. She opened her laptop and entered the secure spine of her life. Dashboards, ledgers, internal comms for Aurelia Systems, the company she architected. Doy appeared on video in seconds. Tall, lean, salt and pepper hair, professor's eyes that cut clutter clean. He'd been her teacher, then mentor, then the proxy who sat in rooms she wasn't ready to be seen in. "He spit on me," she said without embroidery, "in a full dining room." Dewey's jaw set. "I should have dragged you out years ago." "You tried. I didn't want to hear. I kept hoping he'd turn back into the man I married." She exhaled. "That man never existed. I just couldn't see." "Then we move," Dewey said, already pulling files into view. Divorce packet ready. 3 attorneys on standby. For his parents, 18 months of embezzlement for Mr. Dat, nearly a year of confidential info leaks for Mrs. Minion. Proof for both. For Coy and Na Tran, hotels, gifts, texts, and, he paused, "He's been using your money, joint account." Heat and nausea rose together. My money on his mistress. Technically, the disability checks. She almost laughed. The checks were a veil, a pipeline moving hundreds of thousands in Aurelia distributions that no one would question. Coy thought insurance deposited a modest stipend. Irony with an edge. "Say it out loud," Dewey urged gently. "Put it somewhere outside you." "I wrote my first program at 12, she began. "Shipped a real product at 16. Met you in college. We built the security core that became Aurelia. At 22, we had government work. By 23, Fortune 500s were knocking. I was brilliant and naive. I met Coy at a fundraiser. Charming, attentive, said he loved how sharp I was. Proposed in 6 months. I said yes. And you kept your wealth sealed." An ex had loved my balance more than my face. I needed to know love without a ledger. He had his career. I had consulting. It worked until her gaze went distant. A drunk driver ran a red. Car flipped 3 times. I woke up 3 days later. Permanent damage. No walking. At first, Coy was wonderful. Bedside hands, promises in the sterile light. Back home, warmth thinned to sighs, then to resentment. His parents fanned it into open flame. They called her an anchor, his anchor. It was astonishing, she thought, how quickly people confused weight with worth. She'd even helped them once, smoothed their entry into Aurelia through standard channels so no one could accuse her of favoritism. They had no idea whose signature approved their salaries. "Natran started a year ago," she said, voice even. "I saw a text. He blamed me. Said I should be grateful he still came home." "And you stayed." "I stayed," she admitted, "because the world keeps telling disabled women they're lucky for crumbs. Night after night, it sinks in. You start believing you are less." "Not anymore," Dee said. "Not anymore," she echoed. "That spit broke something. Maybe healed it. I'd rather be alone than be diminished. Tomorrow we go public. Freeze access, board meeting. They learn who signs their checks." "Ugly?" he asked. "I'm ready for ugly." They rehearsed the choreography until there were no surprises left. When the message pinged at 3:01 p.m. the next day, served. He did not take it well. She pictured the scene. Coy at his desk, chest puffed. When the process server said his name. Shock. Rage. The first thin crack of fear. Her old number lit with messages that slid from command to insult to plea. She read them like weather rolling through a city she no longer lived in. That evening, she ordered room service and let hot water loosen the knot at the base of her skull. Tomorrow would be the spectacle, the board, the reveal, the cut. Tonight, she let herself exist without asking permission. The headquarters of Aurelia Systems rose like a blade of light. Every angle, from the ramp gradient to the height of the credenza, had been tuned by her specs. Today, she would enter as herself. The private elevator opened into the executive boardroom. Floor-to-ceiling glass, a long glass table, the city laid out like a living circuit. 12 directors sat waiting, including Mr. Dat and Mrs. Minon. She saw the exact second recognition struck. Color drained, shoulders tensed. "What is she doing here?" Mr. Dat muttered. Dewey rolled her to the head of the table. The chair there had been removed, the table edge cut back just enough for her footrests, custom work she'd ordered years ago for this day. "Good afternoon," she said, voice clear. "For those who don't know me personally, my name is Lynn and Taylor. Some of you may have seen me as Lynn and Coy, a name I'll be shedding shortly." A director frowned. "This is a closed session. You are?" She tapped the remote. The Aurelia logo glowed on the screen. Beneath it, founder and controlling shareholder. The room went bright with noise. "That's impossible," someone breathed. "At Holdings," another murmured, naming the trust that had shielded ownership for 7 years. "You're IT?" "I am," she said, clicking to incorporation filings, trust ladders, stock certificates, signatures. "I founded Aurelia 7 years ago and maintained anonymity for safety and privacy. As of today, I'm done hiding." "This is ridiculous," Mrs. Minon snapped, rising. "You're my son's wife. You're on dis—" "I work," Linon said, and pressed onward. Slides unfurled, products whose earliest commits bore her handle, M&A maps she'd drafted, contracts she'd negotiated by proxy. Skepticism thinned into attention. "Why now?" the CFO asked. "Because it's time, and because I've identified serious issues that require my direct hand." Mr. Dat swallowed. Mrs. Minon gripped the arm of her chair. She advanced to a flow diagram. "For the last 18 months, funds have been siphoned through ghost vendors and offshore rails. Total, nearly $2 million. The board erupted. The CFO reached for his phone. "Who?" he demanded. She looked straight at Mr. Dat. "Our VP of Operations." "Lies," he barked, lurching to his feet. "This is personal. Because you're my ex-daughter and—" "Because you're a thief," she said, and brought the receipts to life. Bank trails, invoices, shells, transfers. "The district attorney has had mirror copies for 3 months. Independent verification is complete." He sagged, the fight draining out. "And," she said, turning to Mrs. Minon, "our senior director of client relations has been selling confidential information to Size Shield and Datafort. Total compensation, $400,000. Encrypted emails, split payments, docs pulled via USB, all in the logs." "No, no," Mrs. Minon whispered. "You're a wife. You need us." "I never did," Linon said quietly. "You needed me. You just didn't know." She faced the board again. "Both are terminated effective immediately. Security will escort them out. Criminal referrals have been filed." The door opened. 2 security officers stepped in. "Is this because of that restaurant?" Mr. Dat blurted. "Because your son—" "This is because I protect what I built," Linon said. "Your crimes would have surfaced anyway. The restaurant only sped the clock." Security moved. Mascara streaked. A jaw clenched. The city beyond the glass kept shining, and for the first time in 3 years, so did she. The officers escorted them out. A director in a gray suit cleared his throat. "Ms. Taylor, if you have been steering from behind the curtain, then your record is what we have trusted anyway." Nods circled the table. Prophets had a way of overruling shock. "Thank you," Linon said. "Compliance sweep begins today. Every contract will carry an accessibility clause. Tomorrow we announce a foundation for disabled founders. Aurelia matches external dollars 2 to 1. The board murmured, surprise, calculation, and then approval. By the time the agenda reached interim changes, communications had queued memos that would land 5 minutes after adjournment. In the elevator, Dee finally laughed. "You look like a conductor. A woman who forgot to breathe and remembered at the last slide," she said. Her phone vibrated. The attorney served at 3:04 p.m. He made a scene. HR at Zenith called. 9 in the morning. The property manager, eviction notice posted. Keys recoded in 48 hours. The banker, all joint access frozen. Cards will decline by 7. Clockwork, Dewey said. It is just gravity, she answered. Let go of a lie and everything hanging from it falls. At 6 in the evening, Coy stood in the apartment. The room smelled of cardboard and lemon cleaner. Every trace of her was gone. The height-adjustable counters, the low-hung wardrobe rods, the rigs, even the rug where she liked to angle her chair toward sunrise. He tried cards and apps. Declined. Access denied. He called her old number and left a plea that sounded like a man rehearsing a story for himself. HR called about a disclosure meeting. He went to Na Tron's door at dusk. She had already chosen self-preservation. By night, he sat across from his parents. They looked smaller in their own living room. Audits had teeth. Bail would require money they did not have. He said it out loud, she owns Aurelia. And the sentence turned the air into something new. The next morning, Blackwell and Associates glowed with a calm fury. Sharon watched the security footage and pressed pause on the frame where the spit hung in the air. We filed today, she said. We file loud. I want clarity, Lynn Ann said. Not spectacle. You will have both, Sharon replied. They constructed the case line by line. Adultery, emotional abuse, financial control, medical reports, logs, threads. Then Lynn Ann laid down the ownership documents. The room inhaled as one. The law bent in her direction. By late afternoon, a process server pushed papers across a desk. Minutes later, an HR director at Zenith did what HR directors do. A box, a letter, a hallway that felt longer than architecture allowed. Outside, news had already begun to congeal. Internal memos at Aurelia announced the founder would address staff. The photo of her at the head of the table made its way onto screens faster than design intended. He zoomed in and did not recognize her. Under the leaked image, comments ran like floodwater. That night, a phone call from his mother came jagged with panic. They had been escorted out. They would be charged. Could he help? He could not. He finally named the truth. Everything had always been hers, and the line went quiet in a way that suggested years of misreading. The all-staff the next day felt like a low tide. People gathered with coffees and bright hoodies. Lynn Ann rolled out and said her name. She spoke about code and care, about encryption as consent and security as architecture. She described a foundation that would fund 100 entrepreneurs in year one. Applause rose and held. Dewey added a final note about departures and standards. A small ripple of laughter acknowledged the obvious and turned into a promise. In her office, her nameplate newly screwed in, Dewey placed a white box on the desk. Inside lay the napkin from La Mirabelle. Evidence of a moment, he said. She slid it into a drawer meant to stay shut. The internet moved like weather. At 6 in the morning, a video landed on a mid-tier investigative account. The dining room camera had no sympathy. The lean in, the spatter, the way she folded her napkin. The caption did the framing. By breakfast, morning shows had a parable. He spat on his disabled wife, not knowing she is the founder. B-roll of her atrium speech played next to the footage and did most of the arguing. Where did this come from? Sharon texted. Dye replied that once subpoenaed, it was public record. Also, momentum helps. Detective Sarah Chin called from the district attorney's office. The embezzlement package was solid. Lawyers were already muttering about vendetta. The cases could stand without the restaurant clip. One more note, the ex wanted to make a statement that she was a fraud. Lynn Ann laughed. Patents carry names like engraving. Noise arrived. A gossip site said Coy had been blindsided by a secretive wife. An op-ed asked if the public overcorrects for powerful women. At noon, Lynn Ann chose one serious outlet and did one interview. Why anonymity? Because women in tech get dissected and she wanted to be loved without a balance sheet. Did it make abuse worse? It made her exit routes invisible to him. Sometimes privacy is a trap, sometimes a parachute. The piece emphasized the foundation and the standards, not the feud. The last line said power, properly used, looks like care. That night, Dewey sent a calendar invite labeled something that is not war. He had orchestrated dinner at a quiet place with ramps that were not afterthoughts. There he introduced Isaiah Brennan, a hardware-software engineer with an eye-tracking and micro-motion interface for people with limited mobility. Isaiah adjusted the greeting without fuss when he saw her hands on her wheels. He admired her audit trails with precision rather than flattery. They spoke for hours about switches and tolerances, about adapters and price ethics. He did not poke the wound. When the video came up on its own, he said only, "That looked hard," and left space. By week's end, Aurelia and Isaiah's small firm had a memorandum of intent to integrate his interface, to open source a variant for non-commercial use, and to fund peripherals. It felt like a promise to the version of herself who had tried to do everything with fingers that tired faster. 3 months later, the Taylor Foundation for Accessible Technology opened in a warehouse turned skylit studio. Reporters came for drama, donors for headlines, founders for the work. She spoke 9 minutes about checks and chances and then cut a ribbon and let herself enjoy the ceremony. She worked the room. Isaiah drifted over with a notebook. They should prototype a low-force switch for post-injury neuropathy, the gap nobody sells to. "Do it," she said. "I will buy the first 1,000. They laughed and forgot to brace. That night her inbox contained the final decree. The divorce was stamped and done. He got nothing but personal effects. The restraining order was in place. "Sleep," her lawyer wrote. She did. Coy did not. He paced a studio apartment. Comments bit. A cousin texted that they would need distance. A bankruptcy advisor in a strip mall explained fresh starts in a soothing voice. 3 days after the foundation opening, he came to the lobby and asked to see her. Security called upstairs. Dewey said no. She said, "Let me." She wanted to set down the last shard. In the lobby, he looked smaller. He asked for money. She said no. She told him he was not sorry for harm, only for being seen, and that he was still building a future in which she owed him rescue. He nodded as if locating a border. "Goodbye," she said, and meant it as an end, not a weapon. Upstairs, the windows framed a city that looked like a blueprint instead of a battlefield. Isaiah sent a photo from the lab. The switch clicked. Users with tremor doubled their speed. She smiled the private smile she once saved for first builds and people who had earned softness. 12 months unspooled like strong thread. Meetings were not ambushes. Product reviews treated failure as iteration. Saturdays existed. The foundation funded 123 entrepreneurs. A blind founder shipped a screen reader that understood tone. A gamer with cerebral palsy launched a controller that democratized speedruns. A deaf team built a sign language model with clean training data. Aurelia spent money on the details that signal respect: ramps, counters, captions by default, bathroom doors that open to an elbow. Quarterly numbers did not punish decency. Users rewarded it. She learned to enjoy being visible. On a main stage with 10,000 seats and more cameras than faces, she felt like a teacher with the right lesson plan. "When I started coding," she told the crowd, "I thought security was locks, then agreements, then care. Accessibility is architecture. Build for the edges and everyone fits." The applause held like weather. Backstage, Isaiah waited with water. The cap loosened. "You were good," he said. "I was honest," she said. "Same thing on a good day," he replied. They had taken their time. Friendship clicked into collaboration, into coffee, into a weekend canoe where he learned to lift her the way she preferred, into a conversation where the future was a map. When she said "I love you," it felt like a password she had written herself. 2 hours after the keynote, a headline appeared. Ex-husband of Aurelia founder arrested for fraud. He had been telling acquaintances he was launching a startup with her backing and had collected nearly $200,000. Someone called Aurelia to confirm. The police handled the rest. Isaiah watched her read. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Grief for what he keeps choosing," she said. "Not for him, for the time he refuses to join reality." "That is generous," he said. "It is accurate," she answered. "We are not in the same story anymore." She texted her lawyer, no comment to press, wish him due process. Then she signed 3 foundation checks. Dewey dropped by with updates. The ex-in-laws had taken plea deals and served their time. The open source interface had crossed 50,000 downloads. "You are softer," he said. "I am healed," she answered. That evening they hosted dinner in her apartment. Wide doorways, low shelves, a city view. Donors clinked glasses. Founders debated code style. Board members asked about the United Nations panel. Someone said write a book. She said she would write when the work got boring and thanked them. After everyone left, the apartment settled. On the balcony, light pooled on the floor. Isaiah's hand found hers. "Do you wish you had done it sooner?" he asked. "I wish I had learned sooner that shrinking does not protect you," she said. "I do not wish to trade the person I became. She is the one who could build this." "What is next?" he asked. "More of this," she said. "Fewer emergencies, more rooms with ramps built in, more products that do not make people rehearse their need. Maybe a home that is ours. Maybe a child if that is the shape our love wants." "That sounds like a roadmap," he said. "It is a living document," she smiled. Inside, her laptop chimed. An applicant wrote, "I have never told anyone I am disabled. Your talk made me think I can tell my co-founder and design for me on purpose." "Thank you," she replied. "Design for yourself on purpose. It is how the rest of us get invited in." She closed the lid and thought of the napkin in the drawer, the relic of the last night she wore someone else's definition. Power had been misframed for her, first as money, then as the ability to destroy. The version that lasted looked like the practice of care, daily and unfancy. Morning would bring the foundation's first hack day. She and Isaiah would lay out boxes of switches and sensors. She would watch teenagers with braces and grandmothers with canes teach engineers how to see. She would order too much pizza. Someone would ship something small and perfect. Someone else would fail loudly and be applauded for trying. Dewey would stand in the back, arms crossed, pretending he was not crying. In the late afternoon, she would wheel to the whiteboard and draw 3 boxes. Access, dignity, joy. She would draw arrows between them and then erase them and write, underlined, "We build what we needed." Heads would nod. When the room emptied, she would stand for a minute in the echo and text Isaiah, "Come over." "On my way," he would answer. She would open the door before the bell. On the balcony again, the city would be a circuit she recognized, not because she controlled it, but because she finally chose where to plug in. Somewhere in that map, a woman once told she was an anchor would open a laptop and apply for a grant she would get. Somewhere else, a man would look at a reflection and see not a wheelchair, but a co-founder. Under a sky content to keep its distance, she would think a simple sentence that did not need a speech to live. "I am who I say I am." Then she would turn and go inside, to the life she built on purpose.